Hey guys, tonight we step into the shadowy streets of 1830s Paris, where survival meant theft, disease stalked every alley, and one boy's story begins in the fog clung to Paris like a thief's cloak, thick and gray, swallowing the gaslight's feeble glow along the Rue de la Roquette. It was autumn, 1832, and the city's pulse beat unevenly. Carriages rattled over cobbles in the Faubourg Saint-Honoré, while in the slums of La Courtille, men coughed blood into rags, cholera's shadow lingering like a curse. Jean-Luc, barely 19, slipped through the alleys, his patched coat damp, his dark eyes sharp beneath a tattered cap. His boots, stolen from a drunk tailor, squelched in the mud, the stench of sewage and rotting fish rising from the gutters. His fingers, nimble as a spider's legs, clutched a crust of bread he'd lifted from a baker's stall, his stomach growling but his heart steady. Paris was his crucible, its streets a maze of survival where he'd learned to steal before he could read. The air was sharp with coal smoke and the tang of cheap wine from a nearby tavern, its laughter spilling into the night. Jean-Luc crouched behind a barrel, his breath shallow, watching a merchant in a velvet waistcoat stagger past, his purse jangling. The mark was easy, too drunk to notice, but Jean-Luc hesitated, his fingers twitching. Last week, a boy from his crew, Petit Marc, had been caught lifting a watch. The gendarmes had dragged him to the conciergerie, his screams echoing as they broke his hands. Jean-Luc's own hands, scarred from years of picking locks and pockets, trembled at the memory, but hunger gnawed harder. He darted forward, his knife flashing, cutting the purse's strings in a heartbeat. The merchant stumbled on, oblivious, and Jean-Luc melted back into the fog, the coins heavy in his palm. His haunt was a crumbling tenement in the passage du Cheval Blanc, a warren of thieves and beggars where the walls wept with damp and the air stank of mildew. He climbed a rotting staircase, dodging a sleeping drunk, and slipped into a room no bigger than a coffin. A single candle flickered, casting shadows on Claire, a girl of 16 with matted blonde hair and eyes like chipped glass. She sat on a straw pallet, stitching a stolen shawl, her fingers raw. "Any luck?" she asked, her voice hoarse from the cold. Jean-Luc tossed her the purse, its coins clinking. "Enough for bread and coal," he said, his voice low, his dark eyes scanning the room for signs of trouble. Claire was his shadow, his sister in all but blood, raised in the same gutters after their parents vanished in the cholera of '31. She counted the francs, her lips moving silently, then tucked them under the pallet. "Renard's asking for you," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Says there's a job, big one. But it's dangerous." Jean-Luc's jaw tightened, his fingers brushing the knife at his belt. Renard was the king of their crew, a wiry man with a scar-twisted face and a mind sharp as a guillotine. His jobs paid well but carried risks, prison, the gallows, or worse, betrayal. "Where?" Jean-Luc asked, his voice flat, peeling off his wet coat. "Le Marais," Claire said, her voice barely a whisper. "A noble's house, Comte de Varenne. Gold, jewels, maybe papers. Renard says it's a fortune, but the Comte's got guards, dogs, locks." She paused, her eyes searching his. "You don't have to take it, Jean. We've got enough for now." He shook his head, his dark hair falling into his eyes. "Enough never lasts," he said, his voice raw. "If it's big, we could leave this hole, get a room in Montmartre, maybe a shop." His dreams were fragile, built on stolen coins and hope, but Claire's cough, sharp and wet, reminded him of time's cruelty. He couldn't lose her to the streets, not like their parents. The tavern where Renard held court was a den of smoke and shadows, its tables scarred, its air thick with the scent of absinthe and sweat. Jean-Luc pushed through the crowd, his cap low, his eyes catching the glint of knives and the wary glances of thieves. Renard sat in a corner, his scar gleaming under a flickering lamp, his fingers drumming on a glass. "Jean-Luc," he said, his voice smooth as oil, "you're late." His eyes, cold and gray, sized him up like a butcher eyeing meat. "What's the job?" Jean-Luc asked, his voice steady, though his heart raced. He slid into a chair, his knife hidden but ready. Renard leaned forward, his breath sour. "The Comte de Varennes mansion. Tomorrow night. He's hosting a ball, nobles, diplomats, gold flowing like wine. His safe's in the study, jewels, bonds, and a ledger. That ledger's the prize. Someone's paying heavy for it." He slid a folded map across the table, its edges worn, showing the mansion's layout. Jean-Luc's fingers traced the map, his mind sharp. "Guards?" he asked, his dark eyes narrowing. 6, plus dogs, Renard said, his scar twitching. "But the ball's chaos, your chance. You're the best lockpick we've got. In, out, no blood." He paused, his voice dropping. "Fail, and the gendarmes won't be your worry, I will." Jean-Luc nodded, his jaw tight, the map burning in his hands. The job was a trap wrapped in gold, but refusal meant crossing Renard, a death sentence in itself. He slipped out, the fog swallowing him, his thoughts on Claire's cough and the coins that wouldn't last. The next night, Paris glittered under a waxing moon, the Marais district alive with carriages and laughter, the Comte's mansion ablaze with chandeliers. Jean-Luc, in a stolen footman's coat, slipped through the alleys, his lockpicks tucked in his sleeve, his heart pounding. The mansion's walls loomed, ivy-clad, its windows spilling golden light. He scaled a drainpipe, his boots silent, the scent of roses and wax heavy in the air. The study was on the second floor, its lock a beast of iron, but Jean-Luc's fingers danced, the tumblers clicking like a prayer. Inside, the room was a vault of wealth, mahogany desk, velvet curtains, a safe gleaming like a black heart. He worked fast, his picks clicking, the safe opening to reveal gold coins, emeralds, and a leather-bound ledger, its pages thick with names and numbers, debts, bribes, secrets. He tucked it into his coat, his breath shallow, but a floorboard creaked, a shadow moving. A guard, his saber drawn, eyes wide with fury. "Thief!" he roared, lunging. Jean-Luc dodged, his knife flashing, cutting the guard's arm, blood spattering the rug. He ran, the ledger heavy, the mansion's halls a maze of silk and screams as the ball's guests stirred. Dogs barked, boots thundered, and Jean-Luc leapt from a window, landing in mud, the fog his only ally. He sprinted to the passage du Cheval Blanc, his chest burning, the ledger a weight that could save or damn him. Claire was waiting, her eyes wide, her cough sharp. "You got it?" she asked, her voice trembling, stitching paused. Jean-Luc nodded, tossing her the ledger, his hands shaking. "Renard's prize," he said, his voice raw. "But the guards saw me. They'll hunt us." She opened the ledger, her fingers tracing names, nobles, ministers, a conspiracy in ink. "This isn't just money," she whispered, her eyes glass-sharp. "It's power. Renard's selling it to someone big, maybe the Orleanists, maybe worse." Jean-Luc's heart sank, the fog outside thicker, the city's pulse a threat. He'd stolen more than gold, a secret that could burn Paris. Renard's men would come, or the gendarmes, or the Comte's assassins. He grabbed Claire's hand, her warmth a lifeline. "We move tonight," he said, his voice resolute. "Out of Paris, to the coast. We're done with this life." The streets were a labyrinth, the fog a shroud as they fled, the ledger hidden in Claire's shawl. Paris was alive with danger, gendarmes' lanterns, Renard's spies, the collar his shadow. Jean-Luc's dark eyes scanned every corner, his knife ready, his dreams of a shop in Montmartre fading. The Seine glinted, its waters black, and a carriage rattled past, its driver shouting. Jean-Luc pulled Claire into an alley, his breath steaming, the ledger a burning weight. A figure emerged, Renard, his scar gleaming, his pistol raised. "You thought you'd run?" he hissed, his gray eyes cold. "The ledger's mine, Jean. Hand it over, or Claire's blood stains the cobbles." His men flanked him, knives glinting, the fog closing in. Jean-Luc's hand tightened on his knife, his heart racing. "You'll get it," he said, his voice low, stalling, his mind racing for a way out. Claire's cough echoed, her eyes fierce despite her fear. The alley was a trap, Paris a cage, but Jean-Luc's fingers twitched, his thief's instinct sharp. He lunged, his knife slashing Renard's wrist, the pistol clattering. Claire ran, the ledger clutched tight, and Jean-Luc followed, the fog swallowing them as Renard's curses echoed. They reached the Seine's banks, the water's chill biting, a boat bobbing in the shadows. Jean-Luc bartered the last of his coins for passage, his dark eyes on Claire, her cough worsening. "We'll make it," he whispered, his voice raw, the boat cutting through the river's current. The ledger's secrets burned in his mind, names that could topple kings or save them. Paris faded, its gaslights dim, but the hunt was on, Renard's reach long, the city's grip tighter than ever. The coast was a dream, Le Havre's salt air a faint hope as the boat docked days later, the ledger hidden in Claire's shawl. Jean-Luc's boots crunched on gravel, his eyes scanning for danger, his heart heavy with the cost of their escape. A tavern loomed, its warmth tempting, but a man watched from the shadows, tall, cloaked, his eyes glinting like coins. "You have something of mine," he said, his voice smooth, his accent noble. The ledger's buyer, not Renard, but someone higher, his hand on a cane that hid a blade. Jean-Luc's knife was ready, his dark eyes fierce. "It's ours now," he said, his voice steady, Claire's hand in his. The man smiled, his cane tapping, and Paris's shadow followed them, the thief's life a chain unbroken, the ledger a key to freedom or ruin. The Le Havre docks reeked of salt and tar, the air sharp with the cries of gulls and the creak of ships swaying in the gray dawn. Jean-Luc and Claire huddled in a warehouse's shadow, their breath steaming, the stolen ledger tucked inside Claire's shawl, its leather cover worn but heavy with secrets, names, debts, and plots that could shake the Orleanist throne. Jean-Luc's patched coat was damp with sea spray, his dark eyes scanning the wharf for Renard's men or the noble buyer, his knife ready in his sleeve. Claire's cough rattled, her blonde hair matted, her glass-sharp eyes darting to every shadow. The boatmen who'd smuggled them from Paris had vanished with their last coins, leaving them stranded, the ledger a burning weight in their hands. The noble's voice echoed in Jean-Luc's mind, smooth, dangerous, his cane hiding a blade. "You have something of mine," he'd said, his eyes glinting like a predator's. Jean-Luc's fingers tightened on Claire's arm, his voice low. "We need a ship, England, maybe Holland. Somewhere Renard can't reach." His dreams of a Montmartre shop were dust, survival was all now, the ledger their only leverage. Claire's hand clutched the shawl, her voice hoarse. "The ledger's got names, ministers, generals, even a prince. If we sell it, we're rich. If we don't, we're dead." Her cough cut through, her face pale, the collar as shadow lingering. Jean-Luc's heart twisted, she needed a doctor, warmth, not this damp hell. A lantern flickered, a dockworker's silhouette looming. Jean-Luc pulled Claire behind a crate, his knife glinting, but the man passed, muttering about delayed shipments. The docks were alive, sailors hauling ropes, merchants haggling over cod and wine, the air thick with fish and brine. Jean-Luc's eyes caught a ship, the Etoile du Nord, its sails furled, its captain barking orders. "That's our way out," he whispered, his breath steaming. "We barter the ledger for passage." They crept toward the ship, the ledger's weight a chain. A shout broke the dawn. Renard's men, 3 of them, knives drawn, their faces scarred from Paris's alleys. Jean-Luc's pulse raced, his boots slipping on wet planks as he pushed Claire toward the ship. "Run," he hissed, turning to face them, his knife flashing. The leader, a brute named Gillis, lunged, his blade grazing Jean-Luc's arm, blood seeping through his coat. Jean-Luc slashed back, cutting Gillis's cheek, the man's curse lost in the gull's cries. Claire reached the gangplank, her cough sharp, waving the ledger at the captain, a grizzled man with a salt-streaked beard. "Passage for this," she shouted, her voice breaking. "It's worth a fortune." The captain's eyes narrowed, his hand on a pistol, but he nodded, sensing gold. Jean-Luc fought, his knife dancing, felling another of Renard's men, their blood staining the dock. They boarded, the ship lurching as sails unfurled, the sea churning. Jean-Luc's arm bled, his dark eyes fierce, the ledger safe, for now. The captain, Dubois, took it, his fingers tracing the names, his voice low. "This'll buy your passage, but it's trouble." "Who's hunting you?" Jean-Luc lied, his voice steady. "Just thieves. We're done with Paris." Dubois grunted, locking the ledger in a chest, the ship cutting through waves toward Dover. The sea was a gray beast, its swells rocking the atoll due nor'ard, the air bitter with salt and Claire's coughs. Jean-Luc sat beside her in the hold, her head on his shoulder, her shawl damp. "We'll make it," he whispered, his voice raw, though doubt gnawed. The ledger's names, ministers plotting against King Louis Philippe, nobles tied to rebellions, were a noose. Renard wouldn't stop, and the noble buyer, likely a conspirator, had the coin to chase them across seas. Dover's cliffs loomed days later, white and stark, the air crisp with chalk and coal smoke. Jean-Luc and Claire disembarked, their clothes ragged, their faces gaunt. The ledger was gone, traded for passage, but its secrets burned in Jean-Luc's mind. He'd memorized key names, Comte de Varenne, General Lafayette, a shadowy Monsieur X, enough to barter or blackmail. Dover's streets were grim, its alleys echoing Paris with mud and hunger, but the English air felt freer, the gendarme's shadow gone. They found a tavern, its hearth warm, its ale sour. Jean-Luc paid with a stolen watch, his fingers quick despite his wound. Claire's cough eased with hot broth, her eyes brighter. "What now?" she asked, her voice soft, stitching a torn hem. "We've no money, no ledger." Jean-Luc's dark eyes scanned the tavern, catching a man in a fine coat, his accent French, his eyes sharp. The noble buyer, or his agent? "We use what we know," Jean-Luc said, his voice low. "The ledger's names, their power. We find someone to buy them, start new." His heart raced, the thief's life a chain he couldn't break. The man approached, his coat velvet, his cane tapping. "You're Jean-Luc," he said, his voice smooth, his eyes cold. "The ledger's gone, but you know its secrets. Name your price." Jean-Luc's knife was ready, his mind sharp. "Safety," he said, his voice steady. "For me and Claire." "And 1,000 pounds." The man smiled, his cane glinting, a blade within. They met at dawn, Dover's cliffs stark, the sea roaring. The man, calling himself Monsieur Roland, handed over a purse, its coins heavy, his eyes wary. "The names," he said, his voice low. Jean-Luc listed them, Varenne, Lafayette, Monsieur X, his voice steady, Claire's hand in his. Roland nodded, his cane tapping, but as men emerged, pistols drawn. "You know too much," he said, his smile gone. Jean-Luc's knife flashed, slashing Roland's arm, the purse falling. Claire grabbed it, her cough sharp, and they ran, the cliffs a maze of chalk and shadow. Roland's men fired, bullets chipping stone, but Jean-Luc knew alleys, his thief's instinct sharp. They hid in a smuggler's cave, the seas roared drowning their breaths, the coins of fragile hope. Claire's cough worsened, her face pale, the cave's damp biting. Jean-Luc's heart twisted, his dark eyes on the purse. "We'll get you a doctor," he said, his voice raw. "London, maybe. We'll sell the names again." She nodded, her eyes fierce, but the collar's shadow lingered, Paris's grip unbroken. London was a beast, its streets thicker with fog than Paris, its air choking with coal and desperation. Jean-Luc and Claire found a room in Whitechapel, its walls peeling, its air sour. The coins bought medicine, but Claire's cough clung, her strength fading. Jean-Luc worked the streets, picking pockets, his fingers quick, his heart heavy. The ledger's names burned in his mind, a dangerous currency. He sought a buyer, a radical printer named Harris, his shop a den of pamphlets and whispers, his eyes hungry for revolution. Harris listened, his pipe smoking, as Jean-Luc recited the names: Varennes' debts, Lafayette's plots, Monsieur X's shadow. "This could topple Louis Philippe," Harris said, his voice low, offering a purse and passage to America. Jean-Luc hesitated, his dark eyes on Claire, her cough a knife in his chest. "Passage for two," he said, his voice resolute. Harris nodded, his smile wary. The deal struck. But Roland's men found them, their pistols glinting in Whitechapel's alleys. Jean-Luc fought, his knife slashing, blood staining the cobbles, but Claire stumbled, her shawl falling, her cough choking. He carried her, the purse clutched, Harris's shop a beacon. They reached it, the printer's press clanking, but Roland waited, his cane a blade, his eyes cold. "You can't run forever," he said, his voice smooth, his men closing in. Jean-Luc's heart raced, his knife ready, Claire's weight heavy. He threw the purse, coins scattering, and slashed Roland's leg, the noble's scream echoing. They fled, Harris's men covering, the fog their ally. The docks loomed, a ship to America waiting, its sails gray against the dawn. Jean-Luc boarded, Claire in his arms, her cough faint, her eyes glass sharp. "We'll make it," he whispered, his voice raw, the ledger's secrets of fire in his mind, London's shadow fading as the sea stretched ahead. The Atlantic was a gray beast, its waves crashing against the Liberté, a creaking brig bound for New York, its hold heavy with Irish emigrants and smuggled goods. Jean-Luc sat in the damp shadows below deck, his patched coat soaked, his dark eyes on Claire, her blonde hair matted, her cough a jagged knife in the humid air. The ledger's secrets, names of nobles and ministers plotting against Louis Philippe, scribbled in the Comte de Varennes' hand, burned in his mind, though the book itself was gone, traded for passage. Roland, the noble buyer, and his men were a shadow that followed, their reach stretching across seas. Jean-Luc's arm, bandaged from the fight in Dover, throbbed, his knife tucked close, his fingers twitching with the thief's instinct that had kept him alive in Paris's alleys. Claire lay on a straw pallet, her shawl wrapped tight, her glass-sharp eyes dim with fever. "We're free, Jean," she whispered, her voice hoarse, a cough cutting through. "No gendarmes, no Renard." But her face was pale, the cholera's ghost lingering, the ship's damp air no cure. Jean-Luc's heart twisted, his hand brushing hers, her skin cold. "We'll get you medicine in New York," he said, his voice raw, the purse from Harris, the radical printer, light with coins but heavy with hope. The names, Varennes, Lafayette, Monsieur X, were his currency now, a dangerous hoard to sell or shield. The ship's hold stank of sweat and salt pork, the emigrants' murmurs mixing with the groan of timbers. Jean-Luc bartered a stolen ring for broth, his fingers quick, the ship's cook none the wiser. He fed Claire, her cough easing, but a sailor watched, his eyes sharp, his accent French. "You're the Paris thief," he said, his voice low, his hand on a cudgel. "Word's out, men are looking for you." "Something about a book." Jean-Luc's knife glinted, his dark eyes fierce, but he backed away, the sailor's grin a warning. Roland's reach was long, the ledger's secrets a beacon drawing hunters. Days blurred into nights, the seas roll relentless, Claire's fever spiking. Jean-Luc stole laudanum from the ship's surgeon, his fingers slipping through a locked chest, his heart pounding as he dripped it into her broth. Her eyes brightened, her cough softer, but the sailor's words haunted him. New York loomed, its skyline jagged against a dawn sky, the air thick with coal and promise. The Liberté docked, its gangplank crowded with weary faces, and Jean-Luc carried Claire, her weight light, her shawl hiding their last coins. New York's streets were a chaos of mud and noise, carts rattling, vendors shouting, the air sharp with fish and smoke. Jean-Luc found a boarding house in the Bowery, its walls thin, its air sour with ale and despair. He paid for a room, the landlady's eyes greedy, and laid Claire on a cot, her cough sharp, her eyes searching his. "We're safe," she said, her voice weak, but Jean-Luc's dark eyes scanned the window, catching a shadow, a man in a fine coat, his cane tapping, Roland's agent or another hunter. He sought a buyer for the ledger's secrets, his thief's instincts guiding him through saloons and print shops, the Bowery's underworld a mirror of Paris. A man named Callahan, an Irish radical with a scarred face and a voice like gravel, listened as Jean-Luc whispered names, Varennes debts, Lafayette's plots, Monsieur X's shadow. "That's dynamite, lad," Callahan said, his eyes glinting, offering gold in a hideout in Brooklyn. Jean-Luc hesitated, his heart on Claire, her cough a ticking clock. "Gold and medicine," he said, his voice resolute. Callahan nodded, his grin sharp, the deal struck. But Roland's men found them, their pistols glinting in the Bowery's alleys, the cane man leading, his voice smooth. "You can't hide, thief," he said, his blade flashing. Jean-Luc fought, his knife slashing, blood staining the mud, Claire's scream echoing as she clutched the cot. He felled one man, his arm bleeding, and dragged Claire to Callahan's hideout, a cellar thick with smoke and whispers, radicals plotting against empires. Callahan's men guarded the door, their eyes hard, but Jean-Luc's trust was thin, the ledger's secrets a noose tightening. Claire's fever broke with medicine, her cough softer, her eyes brighter. "You're risking everything," she whispered, her hand in his, the cellar's damp air heavy. Jean-Luc's dark eyes burned, his voice raw. "For you, it's worth it." He memorized more names, the ledger's ghosts, ministers funding rebellions, nobles tied to foreign crowns, a map of betrayal. Callahan's gold bought time, but Roland's shadow loomed, his cane a blade in the dark. The hideout was raided at midnight, Roland's men crashing through, pistols blazing, Callahan's radicals fighting back, blood and ink spilling. Jean-Luc carried Claire, her shawl torn, his knife slashing a path, the Bowery's fought their ally. They reached the docks, a ship to Boston waiting, its captain bribed with stolen watches. Jean-Luc's heart raced, the ledger's secrets afire in his mind, Roland's men close, their shouts echoing. The ship sailed, the seas roared drowning danger, Claire's cough faint, her hand warm in his. Boston was colder, its streets cleaner but no less cruel, the air sharp with salt and coal. Jean-Luc found work in a tavern, his fingers quick with trays, his eyes scanning for hunters. Claire stitched dresses, her cough lingering, her glass-sharp eyes on a future free of theft. Jean-Luc sought another buyer, a printer named Ellis, his shop a den of abolitionist pamphlets, his voice soft but fierce. "Those names could stir revolution," Ellis said, offering passage west, Ohio, a new start. Jean-Luc nodded, his dark eyes wary, the deal a gamble. Roland's men struck again, their cane man relentless, his blade cutting Jean-Luc's shoulder, blood soaking his coat. He fought, his knife dancing, Claire's scream driving him, the tavern's tables splintering. Ellis's men joined, their fists hard, and Jean-Luc escaped, Claire in his arms, the city's fog a shield. They boarded a wagon west, the road muddy, the air crisp with pine and freedom's promise. Claire's cough eased, her smile faint, but Roland's shadow followed, the ledger's secrets a chain Jean-Luc couldn't break. Ohio's fields stretched wide, the air clean, the sky vast. Jean-Luc and Claire found a boarding house, its warmth a balm, her cough fading with rest. He worked as a laborer, his hands calloused, his thief's life a ghost. But the ledger's names burned, a final buyer needed to bury the past. A man named Ward, a merchant with ties to radicals, offered land for the secrets, Varennes' fall, Lafayette's death, Monsieur X's identity. Jean-Luc hesitated, his dark eyes on Claire, her health fragile, the thief's life a weight he longed to shed. Ward's men betrayed them, their knives glinting, Roland's coin in their pockets. Jean-Luc fought, his knife slashing, blood staining the grass, Claire's scream of fire in his chest. He killed one, his hands shaking, and fled with Claire, the land a dream lost. The ledger's secrets were a curse, its name's a trap, but Jean-Luc's resolve hardened, his love for Claire a light in the dark, the road west their only hope as Roland's shadow chased. The Ohio wilderness stretched raw and endless, its forests dense with oak and pine, the air sharp with frost and the distant howl of wolves. Jean-Luc and Claire jolted along in a rickety wagon, their clothes patched, their faces gaunt from weeks on the road. The ledger's secrets, names of French nobles and ministers plotting against Louis Philippe, etched in Jean-Luc's memory, were a fire that drew hunters across oceans. Roland's men, led by the cane-wielding noble, had betrayed Ward's deal, their knives glinting in the Ohio dusk, leaving Jean-Luc's shoulder bleeding, his knife stained with their blood. Claire's cough, a jagged echo of Paris's cholera, cut through the wagon's creak, her blonde hair matted, her glass-sharp eyes dim but fierce. The purse from Ward, now light, held just enough coins for food and shelter, but the ledger's names, Varennes, Lafayette, Monsieur X, were their only hope for a new start. Jean-Luc's dark eyes scanned the horizon, his patched coat damp with sweat, his knife tucked close. "We'll find a town," he said, his voice raw, guiding the wagon's mules through mud. "Sell the names, get you medicine." Claire nodded, her shawl tight, her cough shaking her frame. The wilderness was no Paris, but danger lurked, bandits, bounty hunters, Roland's shadow. Jean-Luc's thief's instincts, honed in the Rue de la Roquette, kept them alive, his fingers quick to steal bread or coin from passing traders. A settlement loomed, a cluster of log cabins called Mill Creek, its air thick with wood smoke and the clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Jean-Luc bartered a stolen watch for a room, the innkeeper's eyes wary but greedy. Claire rested, her cough eased by stolen laudanum, her hands stitching a torn dress, her voice soft. "You're still a thief, Jean," she said, her eyes searching his. "Will we ever be free?" Jean-Luc's jaw tightened, his heart heavy. "One last deal," he said, his voice resolute. "Then we're done." He sought a buyer in Mill Creek's tavern, a rough den of trappers and farmers, its air sour with whiskey and sweat. A man named Kessler, a German merchant with a scarred hand and a voice like gravel, listened as Jean-Luc whispered the ledger's secrets, Varennes' debts to Prussian banks, Lafayette's ties to rebels, Monsieur X's coded letters to a foreign crown. "That's power," Kessler said, his eyes glinting, offering gold and a wagon west to Illinois. Jean-Luc hesitated, Claire's cough echoing in his mind, her life the price of trust. "Gold now, passage later," he said, his voice steady. Kessler nodded, his grin sharp, coins clinking. But Roland's men struck at midnight, their pistols flashing in the tavern's glow, the cane man's blade cutting the air. Jean-Luc fought, his knife slashing, blood staining the floorboards, Claire's scream piercing the chaos. He felled one man, his shoulder wound reopening, and dragged Claire to the wagon, Kessler's gold heavy in his coat. The mules bolted, the wilderness swallowing them, Roland's men pursuing, their horses' hooves thundering. Jean-Luc's dark eyes burned, his thief's instinct sharp, the ledger's secrets a noose tightening. Illinois was a land of rivers and prairies, its air cleaner but no less dangerous, the Mississippi's banks muddy and wide. Jean-Luc and Claire found shelter in a trader's outpost, its walls rough-hewn, its air thick with tobacco and fur. Claire's cough worsened, her fever spiking, the laudanum gone. Jean-Luc stole medicine from a traveling doctor, his fingers quick, his heart racing as he slipped through the outpost's shadows. He fed her, her eyes brighter, but the ledger's names burned hotter, Varennes fall now rumored in Paris, Lafayette dead, Monsieur X a ghost hunting them. A new buyer emerged, a woman named Abigail, an American abolitionist with a sharp mind and a voice like steel. Her cabin was a hub of radicals, its walls lined with pamphlets, its air alive with whispers of freedom. Jean-Luc recited the names, his voice low, the conspiracy's weight clear, French plots threatening American trade, nobles funding unrest. This could shift power, Abigail said, offering land and safety in Missouri. Jean-Luc's dark eyes narrowed, his trust thin, Claire's cough a clock ticking. Land and medicine, he said, his voice resolute. Abigail nodded, her eyes weary, the deal struck. Roland's men attacked at dawn, their cane man relentless, his blade slashing Jean-Luc's arm, blood soaking the cabin's floor. Claire fought, her shawl a weapon, strangling a man, her cough choking but her eyes fierce. Jean-Luc's knife danced, felling another, Abigail's radicals joining, their muskets roaring. They escaped, the wagon rattling, Missouri's promise a faint light. Jean-Luc's wounds bled, his heart pounding, Claire's hand in his, her cough of fire driving him. Missouri's plains were vast, the air crisp with grass and hope, but Roland's shadow lingered, his men tracking through trader networks. Jean-Luc and Claire settled in a hamlet, its cabins new, its people wary of strangers. Jean-Luc worked as a laborer, his hands calloused, his thief's life a ghost he longed to bury. Claire stitched, her cough easing with Abigail's medicine, her glass-sharp eyes dreaming of a home. But the ledger's secrets burned, Monsieur X's identity a mystery Jean-Luc couldn't shake, a name tied to a crown, a plot to destabilize France and beyond. A final buyer appeared, a man named Durant, a merchant with ties to Washington, his eyes cold, his voice smooth. "Give me the names," he said, offering a farm and gold, his hand heavy with rings. Jean-Luc recited, Varennes' ruin, Lafayette's legacy, Monsieur X revealed as a Bourbon prince, exiled but plotting. Durant's eyes glinted, his purse heavy, but his men moved, knives drawn, Roland's coin in their pockets. Jean-Luc's knife flashed, slashing Durant's arm, Claire grabbing the gold, her cough sharp but her feet swift. They ran, the hamlet's fields a maze, Roland's men close, their pistols firing. Jean-Luc's heart raced, his wounds bleeding, Claire's hand in his. They hid in a barn, the haze scent sharp, the night alive with danger. "We end this," he whispered, his voice raw, the ledger's secrets a curse he'd carried too long. Claire nodded, her eyes fierce, the gold their last hope. The barn's shadows moved, Roland's cane tapping, his voice smooth. "You're mine, thief," he said, his blade glinting, the ledger's truth of fire that could burn empires or bury them. The Missouri barn was a fortress of shadow, its hay-strewn air thick with dust and the sharp scent of sweat, the night alive with the rustle of mice and the distant howl of a coyote. Jean-Luc crouched beside Claire, his patched coat soaked with blood from his wounded shoulder, his dark eyes glinting like flint as he gripped his knife, its blade stained from countless fights. Claire's cough, a jagged echo of Paris's cholera, cut through the silence, her blonde hair matted, her glass-sharp eyes fierce despite her fever. The stolen ledger's secrets, names of French nobles like Comte de Varennes, General Lafayette's rebel ties, and the mysterious Monsieur X, a Bourbon prince plotting to reclaim France, burned in Jean-Luc's mind, a a curse that had drawn Roland's men across oceans, their cane-wielding leader's blade glinting outside, his smooth voice a venomous promise. The gold from Durant, the treacherous merchant, lay scattered in the hay, a fleeting hope against the noose tightening around them. Jean-Luc's breath steamed, his fingers brushing Claire's hand, her skin cold but her grip strong. "Stay low," he whispered, his voice raw, his thief's instincts honed in Paris's alleys now their only shield. The barn's walls creaked, Roland's men circling, their boots crunching on frost. Claire clutched the shawl, her cough stifled, her eyes burning. "We can't keep running, Jean," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "Sell the names, end this." Jean-Luc's jaw tightened, the ledger's secrets a fire he couldn't douse, Varennes' ruin, Lafayette's death, the Bourbon prince's shadow plotting war. Selling them meant freedom or betrayal, a gamble with Claire's life. A lantern's glow pierced the barn's slats, Roland's voice cutting through. "You're trapped, thief," he said, his cane tapping, his blade glinting. "The names are your blood." Jean-Luc's heart raced, his knife ready, his mind racing for an escape. He pushed Claire behind a bale, her cough muffled, and crept to a loose board, his fingers quick, prying it open. The night air rushed in, cold and sharp, the Missouri plains vast but unforgiving. "Go," he hissed, shoving Claire through, the gold clutched in her shawl, his knife slashing as Roland's men broke the door, their pistols flashing. Jean-Luc fought, his blade dancing, cutting a man's arm, blood soaking the hay, Claire's scream driving him. He felled another, his shoulder screaming, and followed her, the plains a maze of grass and shadow. Roland's men pursued, their horses thundering, bullets grazing Jean-Luc's coat. He dragged Claire, her cough choking, her feet stumbling, the gold await slowing them. A river loomed, its waters black and swift, a fallen log their bridge. Jean-Luc carried her across, his boots slipping, the current's roar drowning Roland's curses, the night their only ally. They hid in a cave, its damp air heavy with moss and earth, Claire's cough echoing, her fever spiking. Jean-Luc's wounds bled, his dark eyes scanning the dark, his knife ready. "We'll find a town," he said, his voice raw, tearing his coat to bandage her chills. "Sell the names, get you a doctor." Claire's eyes softened, her hand in his. "You're not a thief anymore," she whispered, her voice faint. "You're my brother." Jean-Luc's heart twisted, Paris's gutters a distant scar, the ledger's secrets a chain he longed to break. Dawn broke, the cave's mouth glowing, the river's rush a shield. Jean-Luc carried Claire, her weight light, her cough softer, the gold their lifeline. They reached a trading post, its cabins rough, its air thick with tobacco and fur. Jean-Luc bartered a coin for medicine, his fingers quick, the trader's eyes blind to his theft. Claire drank, her fever easing, her glass-sharp eyes brightening. Jean-Luc sought a new buyer, a trapper named Boone, his face weathered, his voice low, his cabin a den of maps and muskets. "Those names, French nobles, a prince," Boone said, his eyes glinting, offering land and passage west to St. Louis. Jean-Luc hesitated, Claire's cough a clock ticking, Roland's men a shadow closing in. "Land and safety," he said, his voice resolute. Boone nodded, his grin sharp, coins clinking. But Roland struck at dusk, his cane a blade, his men's pistols blazing, the trading post a battlefield of splintered wood and screams. Jean-Luc fought, his knife slashing, blood staining his hands, Claire's cough sharp as she hid, her shawl a shield. Boone's men joined, their muskets roaring, but Roland's blade cut Jean-Luc's thigh, pain searing, his vision blurring. Claire threw a lantern, fire spreading, the post's roof blazing, Roland's men scattering. Jean-Luc dragged her, his wounds bleeding, the gold gone, the ledger's names their only currency. St. Louis was a frontier city, its streets muddy, its air alive with steamboat whistles and the scent of leather. Jean-Luc and Claire found a boarding house, its walls thin, its air sour with ale. Claire's cough eased, her health fragile but holding, medicine bought with stolen coins. Jean-Luc worked the docks, his hands calloused, his thief's life a ghost he couldn't shake. He sought a final buyer, a printer named Hayes, his shop a hub of radical pamphlets, his eyes hungry for change. A Bourbon prince plotting war? Hayes said, his voice low, offering gold and a farm in Kansas. Jean-Luc recited, Varennes' fall, Lafayette's legacy, Monsieur X's Bourbon crown, a map of betrayal that could shake empires. Gold now, Jean-Luc said, his voice steady, Claire's life the price. Roland's men attacked at midnight, their cane man relentless, his blade slashing Jean-Luc's arm, blood soaking the dock's planks. Claire fought, her shawl a weapon, her cough choking but her eyes fierce, striking a man with a crate. Jean-Luc's knife danced, felling another, Hayes's men joining, their pistols flashing. They escaped, the gold clutched, St. Louis's fog their ally, a steamboat to Kansas waiting, its whistle a promise. Jean-Luc carried Claire, her cough faint, her hand warm, the ledger's secrets of fire burning brighter, Roland's shadow ever present. Kansas was a land of endless grass, its air crisp with earth and hope, the horizon vast. Jean-Luc and Claire settled in a hamlet, its cabins new, its people wary but kind. Jean-Luc worked as a laborer, his wounds healing, his thief's life fading, Claire's cough softening with rest and medicine. But the ledger's names burned, Monsieur X's Bourbon plot a shadow Jean-Luc couldn't escape. A new buyer emerged, a woman named Eliza, a settler with ties to Washington, her voice calm, her eyes sharp. Those names could change the world, she said, offering a farm and safety, her hand steady with a pen, not a blade. Jean-Luc hesitated, Claire's health a fragile hope, his dark eyes wary. Safety first, he said, his voice resolute. Eliza nodded, her smile warm, the deal struck. Roland's men struck at dawn, their cane man a specter, his blade glinting, the hamlet's fields a battlefield. Jean-Luc fought, his knife slashing, blood staining the grass, Claire's scream driving him. Eliza's settlers joined, their rifles roaring, but Roland's blade cut Jean-Luc's chest, pain blinding, his strength fading. Claire threw a pitchfork, her cough sharp but her aim true, felling a man. Jean-Luc slashed Roland's arm, the cane falling, the noble's scream echoing. They escaped, the gold safe, Eliza's farm a promise, the ledger's secrets a fire that could free or damn them, Roland's shadow a chain tightening as the Kansas plains stretched wide. The Kansas plains stretched boundless under a sky bruised with dusk, the grass whispering in the wind, the air sharp with earth and the distant tang of wood smoke. Jean-Luc and Claire hid in a settler's barn, its timbers rough, its hay thick with the scent of dust and dried corn. Jean-Luc's patched coat was crusted with blood from his chest wound, his dark eyes scanning the shadows, his knife gripped tight, its blade stained from Roland's men. Claire's cough, a ghost of Paris's cholera, rattled softly, her blonde hair matted, her glass-sharp eyes burning with defiance despite her fever. The gold from Eliza, the settler buyer, was tucked in her shawl, a fragile hope against the ledger's secrets, names of French nobles like Comte de Varennes, General Lafayette's rebel plots, and Monsieur X, a Bourbon prince scheming to topple Louis Philippe. Roland's cane-wielding shadow loomed, his men's hoofbeats echoing across the plains, the ledger's fire a chain Jean-Luc couldn't break. Jean-Luc's breath steamed, his fingers brushing Claire's forehead, her skin hot but her grip fierce. "We're close," he whispered, his voice raw, tearing a strip from his coat to bind his wound. Eliza's farm, its safety, a new start. Claire nodded, her cough stifled, her eyes fierce. "You're not a thief anymore, Jean," she said, her voice hoarse. "You're fighting for us." His heart twisted, Paris's alleys a scar, the ledger's names, Varennes' ruin, Lafayette's death, the Bourbon prince's plot, a noose tightening. Roland's voice echoed from the fight, smooth and venomous, "You're mine, thief." The barn shadows moved, the night alive with danger. A lantern's glow pierced the dusk, Roland's men circling, their pistols glinting, their horses snorting. Jean-Luc pushed Claire behind a stack of crates, his knife ready, his thief's instinct sharp. "Stay down," he hissed, creeping to a crack in the barn's wall, his eyes catching Roland's silhouette, his cane a blade, his coat velvet against the frontier's grit. "The names are your blood," Roland called, his voice cutting the wind. Jean-Luc's pulse raced, his mind racing for an escape. He pried a loose board, the wood splintering, and shoved Claire through, her shawl catching, the gold clinking. "Run to Eliza's," he whispered, his voice urgent, turning to face the hunters. Roland's men stormed the barn, their blades flashing, bullets splintering wood. Jean-Luc fought, his knife slashing, blood staining the hay, his chest wound screaming. He felled one man, his blade cutting deep, Claire's scream echoing as she stumbled into the plains. Roland lunged, his cane blade grazing Jean-Luc's arm, pain searing, but Jean-Luc's knife struck, slashing Roland's thigh, the noble's curse sharp. He ran, the grass swallowing him, Claire's cough a beacon guiding him, Roland's men pursuing, their horses thundering. They reached Eliza's farm, its cabin glowing with lamplight, its fields vast under a starlit sky. Eliza, her eyes sharp, her rifle ready, ushered them inside, her settlers armed, their faces hard. "You brought trouble," she said, her voice calm but firm, eyeing the blood on Jean-Luc's coat. Claire's cough cut through, her fever spiking, and Eliza fetched medicine, her hands steady. Jean-Luc recited the ledger's names, Varennes' debts, Lafayette's rebels, the Bourbon prince's plot to fund a coup with Prussian gold, his voice low, the secrets afire. Eliza nodded, her pen scratching, offering a deed to the farm. "Stay here," she said, her eyes warm. "You're safe." But Roland's men attacked at midnight, their pistols blazing, the cabin's walls shuddering, Eliza's settlers fighting back, their rifles roaring. Jean-Luc's knife danced, slashing a man's arm, blood soaking the floor, Claire's cough sharp as she swung a poker, her eyes fierce. Roland's cane blade cut Jean-Luc's side, pain blinding, but he tackled the noble, his knife at Roland's throat, the fight pausing. "Enough," Jean-Luc growled, his voice raw, blood dripping. "The names are out, sold to men you can't touch." Roland's eyes narrowed, his blade still, but Eliza's rifle fired, a warning shot, his men retreating, the night swallowing their hoofbeats. Claire's fever broke with Eliza's medicine, her cough softening, her glass-sharp eyes brightening. Jean-Luc's wounds bled, his strength fading, but the farm was theirs, the gold safe, the ledger's secrets a shield. Eliza sent the names to Washington, her contacts whispering of French plots, the Bourbon prince's scheme unraveling across oceans. Jean-Luc sat by Claire, her hand in his, the cabin's warmth a balm. "We're free," he said, his voice soft, Paris's gutters a distant scar. But Roland's shadow lingered, his reach long, the ledger's fire a spark that could reignite. The farm thrived, its fields green, the air crisp with harvest and hope. Jean-Luc worked the land, his hands calloused, his thief's life fading, Claire stitching clothes, her cough a faint echo. But whispers reached them, Roland's men in St. Louis, seeking the Bourbon prince's allies, the ledger's secrets stirring unrest. Jean-Luc sought a final buyer, a journalist named Carter, his press a beacon of truth, his eyes hungry for justice. "A prince plotting war?" Carter said, his voice low, offering gold and protection, his pen ready to expose. Jean-Luc recited, Varennes' fall, Lafayette's legacy, the Bourbon prince's name, Charles de Bourbon, his voice steady, the secrets a blade to cut his chains. Roland struck at dawn, his cane blade glinting, his men's pistols flashing, the farm's fields a battlefield. Jean-Luc fought, his knife slashing, blood staining the grass, Claire's scream driving him, her cough sharp but her aim true with a rifle. Carter's men joined, their muskets roaring, and Jean-Luc felled Roland's lieutenant, his blade deep, the noble's scream echoing. Claire's bullet grazed Roland's arm, his cane falling, and Jean-Luc tackled him, his knife at the noble's heart. "It's over," he growled, his dark eyes fierce, blood dripping. Roland's eyes burned, his voice smooth. "The prince knows you," he said, his breath ragged. "You'll never escape." Eliza's settlers drove Roland's men back, their rifles relentless, the plains swallowing the hunters. Jean-Luc tied Roland, his wounds screaming, Claire's cough faint, her eyes bright with triumph. Carter took the names, his press clanking, the Bourbon plot exposed in ink, reaching Paris and Washington, Louis Philippe's throne trembling. The farm was safe, the gold theirs, Jean-Luc's thief's life a ghost fading in the Kansas sun. Claire's health held, her smile alight, the ledger's secrets of fire quenched, Roland's shadow broken, but the prince's reach a whisper Jean-Luc couldn't ignore. The Kansas farm glowed under a harvest moon, its fields golden with wheat, the air crisp with the scent of earth and hay, a far cry from the fog-choked alleys of Paris. Jean-Luc stood by the cabin's door, his patched coat mended, his dark eyes scanning the horizon, his knife tucked away but ever present, its blade a reminder of the blood spilled to reach this haven. Claire sat inside, her blonde hair tied back, her glass-sharp eyes bright, her cough a faint echo, subdued by Eliza's medicine and the prairie's clean air. The gold from Carter, the journalist who'd exposed the ledger's secrets, Comte de Varennes' ruin, Lafayette's rebel ties, and Charles de Bourbon's plot to seize France's throne, was safe in a tin under the floorboards, enough to secure the farm. Roland, the cane-wielding noble, was bound and gone, his men scattered, but the Bourbon prince's shadow lingered, his reach crossing oceans, his name a whisper in Jean-Luc's mind, a threat unburied. Jean-Luc's hands, once nimble in Paris's gutters, were calloused from plowing, his thief's life fading but not gone. He'd fought for this, felled Roland's men, bled across docks and plains, carried Claire from Paris to Kansas, the ledger's secrets a fire that had burned empires. Carter's press had spread the names, Paris's papers buzzing with Varennes' disgrace, Lafayette's legacy tarnished, the Bourbon prince's coup exposed, Louis Philippe's throne trembling. Yet Jean-Luc's heart was heavy, his wounds aching, shoulder, thigh, chest, each a scar of survival. Claire's voice called, soft but firm, "Jean, supper's ready." He smiled, his dark eyes softening, Paris's shadow a ghost he'd almost outrun. Inside, the cabin was warm, its air rich with stew and wood smoke. Eliza's settlers gathered, their faces weathered but kind. Claire served, her cough gone, her smile a light Jean-Luc had fought for. Eliza, her eyes sharp, her rifle by the door, spoke of Washington's interest, senators whispering of French plots, American trade at risk. "Your name's changed the world," she said, her voice steady. "The prince's allies are fleeing, but he's not done. Stay vigilant." Jean-Luc nodded, his jaw tight, the gold under the floor a fragile shield, the prince's reach a shadow that could strike. The night was quiet, the plains whispering, but Jean-Luc's instincts twitched, his thief's senses sharp. A horse's whinny broke the silence, a lantern's glow flickering beyond the fields. He grabbed his knife, his dark eyes fierce, waking Claire, her shawl clutched, her eyes wide but ready. Eliza armed her settlers, their rifles glinting, the farm a fortress. Shadows moved, men, not Roland's, but sharper, their coats fine, their accents French. The prince's agents, sent to silence the ledger's truth, their pistols drawn, their leader a man with a scar across his brow, his voice cold. "The thief and the girl," he said, his eyes glinting. "The prince wants your blood." Jean-Luc fought, his knife slashing, blood staining the wheat, his wounds screaming but his heart fierce. Claire swung a hoe, her aim true, felling a man, her glass-sharp eyes blazing despite her frailty. Eliza's settlers fired, their rifles roaring, the agents falling, the scar-browed leader lunging, his pistol grazing Jean-Luc's arm, pain-searing. Jean-Luc tackled him, his knife at the man's throat, his voice raw. "Tell the prince it's over," he growled, blood dripping. The leader sneered, his breath ragged, but Eliza's rifle ended him, the night swallowing the fight, the farm safe. Claire's cough returned, sharp and wet, the fight's strain heavy. Jean-Luc carried her inside, his wounds bleeding, Eliza's medicine easing her fever. "We're done running," he said, his voice resolute, her hand in his, the gold their future. Eliza sent word to Carter, the journalist's press clanking, the prince's name now a curse in Paris and Washington, his allies arrested, his coup dead. Jean-Luc's heart lifted, the ledger's secrets of fire quenched, the farm a home, Claire's smile a victory. Winter came, the plains blanketed in snow, the cabin's warmth a haven. Jean-Luc plowed fields, his hands steady, his thief's life a memory fading in the frost. Claire stitched, her cough gone, her health strong, her eyes dreaming of a shop, not Montmartre's dream but Kansas's reality. Eliza trained settlers, her rifle a guard, her eyes warm with pride. "You're one of us," she told Jean-Luc, her voice steady, the farm thriving, the prince's shadow broken. But whispers reached them, French agents in St. Louis, seeking the ledger's ghosts, the prince's name still a spark. Jean-Luc sought Carter again, his press a beacon, his eyes fierce. "One last deal," Jean-Luc said, his voice low, reciting the final secrets, Charles de Bourbon's Prussian gold, his letters to exiled nobles, a plot to spark war. Carter offered gold and protection, his pen ready to bury the prince forever. Jean-Luc hesitated, Claire's health a fragile light, his dark eyes wary. "Protection first," he said, his voice resolute. Carter nodded, his smile sharp, the deal struck. The agents struck at dusk, their coats fine, their blades glinting, the farm's fields a battlefield again. Jean-Luc fought, his knife dancing, blood staining the snow, Claire's scream driving him, her rifle steady despite her frailty. Carter's men joined, their muskets roaring, the agents falling, their leader a man with a gold ring, his voice French, his eyes cold. "The prince never forgets," he said, his blade slashing Jean-Luc's side, pain blinding. Jean-Luc felled him, his knife deep, Claire's bullet true, the fight ending, the snow red, the farm safe. Carter's press spread the final names, Paris's streets rioting, Louis Philippe's throne secure, the Bourbon prince exiled, his plot dust. Jean-Luc's wounds healed, his heart light, Claire's cough gone, her smile afire. The farm grew, its fields vast, the air clean with hope. Jean-Luc worked, his hands calloused, his thief's life buried, Claire stitching, her eyes bright with dreams. Eliza's settlers called them family, the plains a home, Paris's shadow gone, the ledger's secrets of victory that reshaped empires.